Rock and roll deaths are not that uncommon. In fact, musicians generally have lower life expectancies than the regular population. But I do want to bring to your guys' attention a Washington Post article that discusses how the genre that a musician plays can greatly impact their life expectancy and how they're more likely to die. But sometimes certain bands can seem cursed, and that even carries over to their tribute acts as well. The counterculture jam band Grateful Dead would form in 1965 in Palo Alto, California, and their career would span 3 decades. While their lineup remained mostly consistent with Jerry Garcia and Bob Weir on guitar, Phil Lesh on bass, and Bill Kreutzmann and Mickey Hart on drums, the same really can't be said for their keyboardists. In fact, the position might be cursed, with some fans referring to it as, and I quote, the curse of the Grateful Dead keyboardist. The group would have 4 keyboardists who died, with 3 of them dying while they were actually in the band. Even the band's final tour in 1995 seemed to be cursed, as trouble and a death threat seemed to follow the group around. I just want to let you guys know that this is a story that's been requested by you guys, the subscribers and viewers, and if you guys have suggestions for future topics you'd like to see me do, use the link in the description box below. The group's original keyboardist and founding member of the band would be Ron Pigpen McKernan, and he would take his name from the Peanuts comic. He was steeped in the blues and would meet guitarist Jerry Garcia in San Francisco, with the pair playing together in various bands before forming Grateful Dead, while McKernan would be employed as the group's original frontman and play the organ on harmonica. His bandmates, including Garcia and Lesh, soon started embracing more psychedelic rock, with that taking more of a prominent role in the band's future. By 1968, McKernan's role had diminished in the band, and they soon hired a new keyboardist in Tom Constanten, with McKernan being limited to vocals, percussion, and harmonica. While his bandmates indulged in psychedelic drugs, McKernan indulged in drinking, and it would soon take a toll on his body, as by 1971, he was advised by doctors to retire from the road after being found to have cirrhosis of the liver. McKernan would, however, rejoin the band temporarily by the end of the year, but he had to permanently retire from touring by June of 1972. Sadly, it was in March of 1973, at the young age of 27, he was found dead as a result of a gastrointestinal hemorrhage. He basically drank himself to death. Meanwhile, Constanten would leave Grateful Dead not feeling like he was a good fit. He was also a member of the Church of Scientology, so he never really partook in the partying and psychedelic drugs. Luckily for Constanten, he avoided the keyboardist curse and is still alive today. The group would hire Keith Godchaux to fill in for McKernan starting in 1971 at a show at the University of Minnesota. It was a few months after that he became a full-time member. According to the 2017 documentary Long Strange Trip, Godchaux joined the group when his wife walked up to the band, introduced her husband as the band's new keyboardist. His wife Donna would also become a member of the group. Godchaux would spend his first several years with the group on the road until they took a short break by the middle of the decade. It was upon returning to the road in the later part of the 70s that he was dealing with both anxiety and depression, and that was only made worse by the band's grueling tour schedule. He soon turned to drugs and alcohol to cope, and that would start to greatly affect his performance during live shows, with him sometimes nodding off. He would eventually be fired from the group along with his wife in 1979. Following his exit from Grateful Dead, he would form a new band with his wife, titled Heart of Gold, and it was following a rehearsal in 1980, Godchaux and a friend slammed into the back of a truck, with a keyboardist eventually succumbing to his injuries 2 days later at the age of 32. Godchaux would be replaced by Brent Midland, who was already a fan of the band. He would join Grateful Dead in 1979, and he would be regarded by some fans as the band's best keyboardist. He would also go on to be one of their most productive and longest-serving keyboardists. But it was following a tour in the summer of 1990, Midland would die in Lafayette, California, as a result of an accidental drug overdose. He was just 37 years old. Upon learning of Midland's death, a deadhead named Vince Welnick would get an audition to fill the keyboardist spot, and he got the job. He was already known in the San Francisco music scene, but Welnick would have to deal with many obstacles in his life, including dealing with several bouts of depression, and he would end up surviving cancer. He would still be involved in music following Grateful Dead's dissolution in 1995, and would play with several tribute acts. But in 2006, he was dealing with another bout of depression, and in June of that year, Welnick would take his own life at his home, and he was just 51 years old. But then there's also another name on the list, albeit not an official member of Grateful Dead. Scott Larned, who played in a popular Grateful Dead tribute band called Dark Star Orchestra. He would die due to a heart attack at a hotel where he was staying on tour, and he was just 35 years old. But the story doesn't end there. Let's fast forward to the final year of the band in 1995 when they're out on the road. MTV News would publish a story in 1995 that read Grateful Dead Curse. At the time, guitarist Jerry Garcia was dealing with a death threat, and the threats were so serious that both the FBI and local police required the band to play with the house lights on during their whole gig. The MTV article would go on to state, and I quote, "Deadheads have been struck by lightning at RFK Stadium in Washington, D.C. They've died of heart failure. They've set fire to a suburban high school in Hawley, Michigan. And they even staged a mini riot in Indiana last weekend when they couldn't get tickets, which resulted in the cancellation of the next night's show." And that's not all. More than 100 Deadheads were injured Wednesday, July 5th, when a two-story pavilion at a campground in Missouri collapsed on them. 200 fans had taken cover in the pavilion during an electrical storm.
The band calls it a disturbance. The fans call it a shame. Deer Creek canceled the Grateful Dead's concert tonight following last night's clash with hundreds of police officers. In tonight's top story, Nightcast, Adam Shapiro reports nobody is taking any chances.
It's been canceled today.
Say goodbye, sleeping bags, to Grateful Dead.
Or in other words, the party is over for the 50,000 Deadheads who plan to party at Deer Creek Music Center.
We do not consider what happened last night to be a riot.
Heads up! Out of the way! Get out of the way!
From what I've gathered, it wasn't a significant number of people.
Man, I thought they were going to take the whole fence down. People just storming the hill.
3,000 of them, according to sheriff's deputies. A scene so chaotic that Indiana State Police riot squads were called in to restore order. It took more than 200 officers. Yet on the other side of that fence, Deadheads rocked to a different beat.
Worst cold feeling I most ever had.
There were just way too many people. We saw no reason that would change today, and that's why tonight's show's canceled.
4 police officers injured, 15 police cars damaged, and 17 arrests. Nobody wants a repeat performance.
I think people should be ashamed of themselves for rushing the fence like that. They ruined it for everyone.
And left a lot of Deadheads with tickets to nowhere.
The group's final tour would be referred to as, and I quote, the Tour from Hell. Garcia himself was in poor health and was struggling with substance abuse, and it showed during their final tour. That summer tour in 1995 would be the band's last, as Garcia would pass away 2 months after it ended due to a heart attack.
Big loss for the world, for anyone who loves music. We also have to remember that his life was far more a blessing for all of us. And I think we should, perhaps, if we're going to dwell on anything, dwell on that.
To their fans, affectionately called Deadheads, it represented a way of life. It was that sort of devotion that made Garcia and the Grateful Dead a top concert attraction 3 decades after they began playing music.
No other band, I think, matched the extent of audience devotion that the Dead have gotten for a long period of time now, since the 60s really.
In addition to playing music, Garcia was an artist. He also launched a very successful line of colorful neckties.
Since his passing, the surviving members of the Grateful Dead have toured as spin-off acts of the original band. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again on Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.